Hi everyone, we are going to talk about how to do a PR plan. This is the basic foundation of almost any PR campaign or client that I have had. Whenever I have a new client, I work on putting a PR plan together for them. Or if I have a new project that I've been assigned or that I want to do, I put together a PR plan. So this is going to be the different steps and how we do that. Remember, the PR plan is, let me get back to full screen. There we go. Um, is race. And first you start doing research. We'll unpack that here in a second. And then you do planning. And we use the term action planning just so that we can make it fit into the race abbreviation. And then communication and measurement or evaluating. How did everything go? So that is what we'll talk about today, starting with research. And that's the first step in the race. You have to know what you're writing about. What situation are you dealing with? Who are you writing to? What do they think about your organization or your problem that you have? And so this helps you move away from the seat of the pants or reactive fly-by-night um, actions and helps you make more strategic decisions. It's really just listening to your audience and your different publics to see what they are, how they're feeling about your organization, what they need from you, etc. And that will help you map out a strategy as you go forward. So research is necessary, especially today. We have a large fragmentation of audiences where, because of all the media that's available to us, we are all using different technology. So if my PR campaign needs to go to younger people, I'm not going to be using the daily newspaper to do that. I might be using TikTok or Snapchat or something like that. But if I'm doing a PR plan to my parents who are in their 80s, I definitely would use the daily newspaper and some written methods to communicate to them. So you have to know who your audience is so that you know what type of media they're using, so that you know how to communicate to them. So you have to have a detailed knowledge of who your audience is. And that is so much more accessible today than it used to be because of all the tools that we have via the internet to figure those things out. And so if you understand who your audience is, what problems they have, what fears they have, their hopes, their lifestyles, that helps you develop your messages for that audience. Another reason is that we have an increasing isolation of top management. We have those elites that are at the top, and they are pretty much unconnected, disconnected, I should say, to the rest of us, the regular audience people. And because of that, a PR person can help keep them informed about who your audience is, how they're thinking, what their daily lives are like. So it's an important part of a PR person's job is to be that liaison up to management. So, and CEOs, executives, they really like data. They like research. The more of that you can provide, the more credible you will be, and the more credible your ideas and your plan will be to them. And also, research can help an organization from wasting time. So maybe you think your organization is being perceived a certain way. You do research, and then you find out, oh, we're not really being perceived that way. So we don't need to take that action to continue to communicate that. And also research can help you decide, okay, this is what our problem is, and this is how we can address that issue through a PR campaign. Okay, so research, there's lots of different types of research, and we're not going to get real heavy into this. This is an intro class, so I'm just going to touch the surface of it all. But you can always do formative research. That's the research you would do in advance to actually putting out a campaign so that you can get information to provide the substance for that campaign. So that's what you would do before, formative research. Evaluative is what you would do after a campaign to see if it met your objective, if it worked or not. We'll talk more about that at the very end. So you can use informal research methods. I still think these are really valid and important to use, to always keep track of these, to always know what people are thinking and saying just on that day-to-day basis, even if it's not through a formal research campaign. It could be through personal contacts that you have. talking to people, the emails that they send you, the comments that they leave on your Facebook page. So and also just talking to people you can get a lot of information about that. So if I'm a PR person for Rochester University, I would want to talk to students to see how they're feeling about things, or talk to prospects and see, hey, have you heard of us before? When did you first hear about us? How did you hear about us? That type of thing. Often, this is where an agency or a corporation or a nonprofit might hire a PR agency because they have that outside voice that they can provide to you. They have a lot of extensive contacts, and they can help you kind of perceive and know what other people are thinking about your company. You can form committees to help you do that. In fact, in the School of Business and Professional Studies, which is what the Department of Mass Communication is in, we are forming advisory committees for like the marketing department, for the sports and management department, for mass communication, made up of some of our alumni, but also mass communication professionals throughout the area, so that they can advise us on where the industry is going and provide contacts for us as well. There's always informal research methods. Those methods continue where, watching the media, setting up a Google alert so that you know what's being said about your organization. What kind of mail are you getting, if it's email or letters? What kind of calls? What kind of information are you getting through social media? I've mentioned Google Alerts. It's real easy to do. Go to Google and put in Google Alerts, and it'll show you how to do it. But I could set, for example, a Google alert for Rochester University. And then anytime that Rochester University or Rochester College was mentioned, then I would be able to go to and see that article. So that's the number one thing I do whenever I have a new client or a new project that I'm working on. Facebook, Twitter, all that social media, those are great places for you to get to do research. You can see what's trending in your industry, what's just trending, and how you can use that as a PR person. Other kinds of research are secondary research. These are the ones, this is already out there, it's already existing. This is a lot like what you do as a student, where you're getting information from sources to include in your research papers or your projects that you're working on in different classes. So the information is already out there, and you know how to grab it and use it for your organization. So that is something that a PR person does as well. So one of my clients in the past was Big Boy Restaurants. So got a lot of information from Restaurant News. It's a publication, trade magazine called Restaurant News. I could look at their surveys and their information, and I could apply what I found to my client, Big Boy Restaurants. Then there's primary research. This is the research that you do yourself or that your organization does. So if you have a marketing department in your organization, your company, you can use their research and use their findings and apply it to your PR campaign. There's two different kinds of research, two broad categories: qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is more exploratory. It's more interviewing, observation, focus groups. It's not as numbers oriented. Quantitative is more numbers oriented. You'd have exact mail surveys, telephone polls, where you'd have yes or no answers, or whatever your questions might be, that you could put into data. All right, and there's just some examples of this. Is from your book. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but I want you to be sure and know the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. So be sure, pause it and read it here, or go read your chapter and you can find it there as well. Okay, so different places you can get research. Your organization should have materials already. So anytime I have a new client, guess what? I go to their website. I go see if they have a PR or media page that I could look at. I do all kinds of Googling about them to find out what I need to know about that client. A new client that I have that I'm doing some editing for is an international automobile advisory council, and they do all kinds of videos and training things for automobile manufacturers around the world. So I don't get into the heart of that. I'm just doing editing for them, but it helps me kind of know who they are and what they're trying to do, if I know more about them than when I'm actually editing the work. Library and online databases, tons of those out there, very similar to what you would do when researching for a paper or something like that. The internet, of course, always be careful about your sources. You know, are they credible? What agenda might they have, etc. A content analysis. I did this for my thesis. I was using. I did 7 different universities, Christian universities, and I examined the perceived reputation of that university, and the intended reputation versus the perceived reputation. So intended, I did a content analysis of all their marketing, their admissions material. So all those brochures, newsletters, emails that went out, and I analyzed those, and I talked to, what kind of wording did they use? What were they focusing on? And I broke it all down and did a content analysis. And then I moved into a different way, and I did more of a sampling method where I went and interviewed youth groups, students that were in different youth groups, and I did surveys and things just to say, okay, what did you think about this view book from Rochester University? What kind of interpretation did you get from that? So then I compared the intended, what the university intended, and then what the audience, what the students actually perceived when they were reading that material. So it's kind of an example of content analysis and also interviewing. You could do focus groups, we'll talk more about that, copy testing, and of course, all kinds of sampling methods as well. So random sampling is when everyone has an equal chance of being selected. If you're like me, you might enter some of those HGTV, Win This Dream House contests that you can enter every day online. Supposedly, it's random, totally random sampling. So some computer or someone out there just selects someone's name and they win. I haven't won yet, but if I do, it will be because it was very random. So everyone has an equal chance of being selected. Non-probability sample is not random. So the most precise is random sample is when you select one person from everyone in your target audience. So that's your book talks a lot more about random sampling. So check that out. Your sample size is also important. You'll hear this a lot in, if you follow any of the election coverage. If you follow any election coverage, then you will hear them say that there were 1,000 people that were interviewed, and that gives us a 3% margin of error. So if, let's say, it's Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and before the election, it's showing that Biden has a 40% approval rating or chance of being elected, and then Trump has a 45%, but the sampling margin of error is only 3%. That would basically mean it was tied, because it could be 3%. Either 48 could go up to 51, or 48 could come down to 45. So anyway, the larger the numbers that you have, then usually your margin of error is smaller. And smaller, of course, is better. And of course, you have to sample the right people. As we know from the 2016 election, a lot of the predictions about who would win the election were wrong. They basically were, national polls were showing something that was different from state polling. So those things are very, interesting, and they get really complex. And this class is not the place for that. When you get to upper division classes like mass comm theory, media ethics, you'll talk a little bit more about those type of things, because you'll be doing some of your own research. But for now, that's enough to know. The larger the number of people that you're interviewing or surveying, the better, because you'll have a smaller margin of error. Okay. One way to reach out to people is, of course, mail questionnaires. I get some of those. I don't fill very many out. Of course, you can do that online. There's always telephone surveys that, people get called all the time to try to participate in certain surveys. Personal interviews, piggyback surveys, web and email surveys. Piggyback is like you buy a product and then you take a survey, something like that. And web and email surveys, of course, we all probably have had interaction with those as well. So there are different, we've been talking about informal, and then there are formal research methods. Focus groups is something that PR people use quite a bit. you would get a group of people together that are in your target audience to ask them about how they felt about a product or a service. So again, if I was doing something for RU, I could bring together a group of students and have questions that I ask in an interactive group setting. Those students could answer those questions and also talk to one another. And then you are always, you have people evaluating. You're taping it, you're evaluating it, so that you can kind of get an idea of how people are feeling about your university or your product, whatever it might be. So Ernest Dichter originated the idea of having a group therapy for products, and this became known as focus groups. So focus groups are usually, you must have open-ended questions because you need people to discuss things. You're wanting to encourage interaction. Usually a focus group is only assembled once. I've been in focus groups before. I haven't really participated in one in a while, but I think that I went to was for a deodorant or something. I'm going to show you one here in a second, an example that I found on YouTube for you. We'll watch part of it together here. And that also gives you opportunity to watch for nonverbal communication, gestures, facial expressions, all those things to see how people are feeling. So here's an example of a focus group that I have already. Oh, I lost it. Let me come back and pause this, and I'll be right back. Okay, here we go. This is about a salad dressing packaging, about the type of packaging the tops on salad dressing. So let's watch this together.
Standard salad dressing. What do you think of it on this one?
Same thing. I like the portion. Well, at least the fact it's not going to gush out. I like that. I like the flip top.
When I screw this, like I'm really going to pour too much product on, and then end up wasting the product. I'm actually going to save money by using this because it's channeled and I can portion control how much I want to use on it. How many of you overall prefer the flip top on this bottle? Raise your hands. Everyone. For those of you that think that it does look higher quality, what makes you think that? Go ahead.
It looks like some thought went into it because this is a standard cap. From when I was a child, they were always like this. This is some thought. Somebody said this is a better way to do it.
Okay, so I didn't want to play too much of that, but it gives you an idea of what a focus group is like. And let me get this. There we go. I'm trying to get everything flipped back here on my computer. So it gives you an idea of how a focus group is coordinated. You can notice that the questions were open-ended. People were allowed to talk to one another. Anyone could respond. And then I didn't show enough of it, but then they could interact with one another as well. And it gives you a good idea of how they felt about that packaging for that salad dressing. The link is on there. If you want to watch the rest of it, you can do that on your own. All right, and then there's survey research. We've all done surveys. Of course, it's a very common method that we use in public relations as well as other places. But we can look at demographics. We can figure out the age of our public, what sex they are, the occupation, things like that. But we also can do psychographics, which is where you get a little bit deeper into like their opinions, their attitudes, how they're feeling about critical issues. And if you want to do that, of course, there's all kinds of tools. One most popular is SurveyMonkey is one that you can use to develop. And of course, if you have a lot of questions, you have to pay for it. But even doing simple surveys, you can do through SurveyMonkey, Google Forms. You can do a lot of things with that as well, even if it's just maybe a smaller sample or a smaller number of questions that you're using. So this is each category here that we're going through of race. I'm going to give you just an example. A few years ago in one of my PR writing class, we developed as a class, we had a client, Hope House Detroit, and we did a PR plan and we did a whole PR campaign for that client. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of the research that we did. We were, on this part, we were looking at keyword research, and so we used Google Keywords tool and Google Trends. And so we were trying to find what are the right keywords that people would be using. They wanted to search for a volunteer group or volunteer opportunity or a place to donate money or something like that, so that we could make sure that we're using the right keywords on our website, in our blog, and all of those things, so that if people are searching for that, they may come upon Hope House Detroit. So we did research, and one of my groups came up with some of these terms for. These are keywords that people would search for, like Volunteer Detroit, Volunteer Detroit Reading Children, Community Service Detroit, those type of things. So those are the kind of some of the things, the keywords that people would be putting into their Google search, and that might help them land on a Hope House Detroit website or blog, that type of thing. We'll come back to more things that we discovered for Hope House Detroit in after we talk about each different category. All right, so next is planning. This is the second step. So basically, you've done your research, and now you say, okay, this is what we found, and then you start making some decisions based upon that research. So again, planning is strategic and it's systematic. Planning is very important. You don't want to have to react too much to things. You want to be proactive, and you want to put things in a positive light as much as you can and not a negative light. So there's 8 elements. This is in your book, and I'm just going to go through this quickly again and give you some examples. You can define the situation. This could be that you're having an event. Rochester University, this is our 60th year. 2019-20 is our 60th year. And so we could do a whole PR campaign around 60th anniversary. That's an example. It could be image oriented. Maybe people think that your pizza chain is cheap, that it's affordable, but the food's not very good. You can see Domino's has done a lot of work on that and try to improve the image that they have of the pizza, their pizza that they make. It could be issue oriented. It could be to try to get people to stop smoking. It could be a crisis. Maybe you, a PR person for Boeing, and of course Boeing they've had some, their Boeing Max plane has had a couple of crashes, so they've had to stop making it. People aren't buying it, so it's a big crisis that Boeing is going through. It could be product oriented. I guess that could apply to Boeing as well, but it could be, again, any type of salad dressing or product that you may be using. You can use that to overcome any negative perception. It could be a specific one-time project, or it could be something that you continue on. It could be an extensive one. And it might just be a way of, maybe there's already a program that you're doing that has been successful, and you say, okay, let's build on this. Let's make this even better and bigger. And so you could expand on that as well. The next element is defining the objectives of what you're trying to accomplish. This is informational. It could be, I'm trying to let people know that we have a new degree at Rochester University in computer science. Basically informational. It could be motivational. Maybe I'm wanting to get people to go on the GEO on our study abroad trip, and I'm trying to motivate people to do that. Again, your objectives need to be realistic. If I only have 3 students going to GEO one semester, I don't want to think that I'm going to get 30 to go the next semester. So keep your goals, your objectives realistic. Don't be too far out with them all. You also have to think about your budget, how much money you do or do not have, the time factor, how much time you have. And then you're going to write all this down. You're going to put your objectives in writing and focuses your thinking and focus you on your different audiences as well. The third one is to define who the audience is. Who are you trying to inform or motivate about something? Again, we've talked about how segmented our audiences are now, and so you really need to know who you're communicating to. I'm going to write differently if I'm writing to a young person than if I'm writing to an older person. I'm just going to use different words. So there's just different techniques for the different audiences. So it's really important for you to know who you are targeting. Also, then you talk about your strategy. How can you achieve these things? What messages do you need to communicate? Maybe it's, like I said, maybe it's informational, maybe it's motivational. What kind of messages? What are the key messages that you want to get out to your audience? Then you're going to define the tactics. How are you going to do that? Are you going to rely on a website only? Are you going to put together a video? Are you going to do a blog? What are the different nuts and bolts? These are the actual strategies that you'll be using. And then what's your timetable? What kind of time frame are you working with? When should you start? When should you stop it? What's the right order of events? And then you'll complete a list of all those steps. Then you define the budget. How much will all this cost? What kind of budget do you have? Do you need to do TV advertising? Do you need billboards? Those all cost money. So you have to think about, do I have money if I want a TV campaign? If you don't have the money, you can't do it. So think about how much money you have. There's a lot of ways today that we can communicate without a lot of money if we do it effectively. But it's important to know what kind of budget you're working with. And number 8, define the measurement. Then you're going to evaluate everything after the fact and say, are these realistic? Are they credible? That type of thing. So make sure that you're doing all of those things and when you are planning. So here's an example from Hope House Detroit. Again, I'm not using all the PR plan, just parts of it. But we talked about who our target audiences were. So we said we need donors to build more houses and to help more kids. Not only do we need donors, we need consistent donors who aren't just giving once, but who are repeating their donations to Hope House Detroit. We need more volunteers. We need consistent volunteers. Maybe a target audience could be different churches that might support that and send people out to help. Colleges and college students. All of this, those were all target audiences for Hope House Detroit. If you don't know, Hope House Detroit is on the east side of Detroit. It's a wonderful place where they have built homes and they do reading programs and just places for kids to hang out. They put in a basketball court. It's really a very cool place, and they're doing really, really good work in their small community, the neighborhood that they're in East Detroit. And so the key messages that they could do would be like, hey, we have opportunities for youth and college ministry groups to serve in the Detroit area. We can, partner with people who want to provide educational and community building programs for children in the neighborhood. We want people to know that we're a good neighbor and we're there to help people, those type of things. So we had these key messages that we developed for Hope House to use when they're communicating to their different audiences. Okay, on to step 3, and that is communication and measurement. This also moves us to chapter 6. So communication is where you're actually executing the decisions that you made in the planning stage. So we said, okay, we're going to use social media. We're going to make a video, whatever it might be. So how do we implement the planning that we just did? So in your book, there's several different theories about communication, and I've just picked out a couple of them here to talk about in this lecture. Be sure and review all of them and be familiar with them because they're all very helpful. Grunig, his objectives were, first you have to get your message out there, you have to expose it. You have to do it accurately as well. You have to know if people accept the message or not, if they even heard it. And did it change their attitude? And then did they change their behavior? So those are the very basic steps that Grunig goes through as the objectives of how we're communicating. Another one that I like is uses and gratifications. Why do people use the media? Why do they use certain media? Maybe they want to be informed or educated. Maybe they just want to be entertained, escape, for a little while from their daily life. Maybe they're using media to interact with other people. So they're all watching the same show, then they're all going to talk about it the next day at work, or they're all watching the same football game and talking about it the next day at work. Maybe they're all watching the Lions lose, and I guess we're all kind of used to that, aren't we, in this area, unfortunately. So they use it to feel connected to other people, and they also use it to escape from real life situations. So if you understand how your audiences are using their different media, that also helps you understand how to communicate with them and to reach out to them. So also it's important to note that we have both passive and active audiences. Passive are those that maybe they're using a communication channel. They have music playing while they're doing something else. So they might hear an ad on Pandora or Spotify. They may have the TV on in the background. So you may, you may get through to them when they're not actively seeking you. Then you have active audiences, and these are the ones that are really seeking out information. And this is where you clue in on those keywords that people are searching for. Or I'm always searching for, even after I watch a TV show, well, what really happened? Something like that. So active audiences, they're seeking for information. So you have to know, is your intended audience, are they going to run across you basically, will it be passively or actively? And so you really want to have multiple ways to reach out if you want to have a really full-fledged information campaign. It is important to use the right kind of language, understand cultural differences. We really talk about, being a very clear and concise writer and being writing simply. My husband and I were talking about this even this morning because he's working on his PhD and reading a lot of journal articles and things that are really kind of complicated and heavy and really long sentences. That's not what we're trying to do in our professional standard. We're not trying to impress anyone. We're not trying to confuse anyone. We are just trying to express something. So it's important that you use the right words, the right techniques, and make sure your communication is clear to your audience. So again, you have to know who your audience is to know how to communicate to them. But there are some readability formulas that you can find online. I have a link here that you could check one out where you can put a paragraph or a sentence into there and you can see how readable is this for my audience. So I've got that link in there for you. You can use symbols and acronyms and bullet points and slogans and all of those things to try to get people's attention. You don't want to use jargon. If it's a certain industry where, if I'm just using jargon from journalism, or I talk about a graph or a boilerplate or inverted pyramid or any of those things, you and I might understand those things because we're in that field, but others won't know what those mean. So avoid jargon, avoid cliches, avoid hype, all of those things, and try to have a very simple and clean and clear writing. You want to make sure you have good source credibility as well. I have a photo here of Walter Cronkite, who was on CBS News for years, did the evening news, and most people talked about he was the most trusted man in America just because of his reputation and the way he communicated to audiences. This is him on the day that he was reading reports that President Kennedy had been shot in Dallas and that he was announcing to people that President Kennedy had died. So he had a lot of source credibility. So that's just my example. But if you're using people as spokespersons, or you have to understand how people feel about you and feel about your spokespeople, and make sure that you have that credibility. The more credibility you have, the better your message will be received. Also, what is the context? Is it relevant? Is it real? Is it unbiased? Try to make sure you're following all those steps. And of course, you have to make the message memorable. Repetition is important. Try to use the same words and different techniques, and to be repetitive, especially when we have so much information coming at us at all times, to try to help your message stand out, and to deliver that information in a variety of ways, using multiple channels. So people accept ideas slowly. So you don't think you're going to change someone's opinion overnight, whether it's using antibiotics. So many people, we tend to overuse them so that they're losing their effect. So there's been campaigns about, let's not use antibiotics for everything. Let's slow down. If you have a cold, you don't need an antibiotic until that moves into something more serious. Or it could be, how do we convince someone to stop smoking? And that's something that's going to be a campaign that takes time. It's not going to happen overnight because people don't change their habits overnight. So this 5-step acceptance process is really important. It's in your book and you can see it here. But I'm not going to read it all to you. You can do that, pause it and read it, or go to your book and read it. But I want to talk to you. I just, for my Christmas present for my husband, I got an Amazon Echo, one of the speakers. I think it's just Amazon Echo. I don't even know if it's third generation. I remember that. But anyway, becoming aware. Of course, you hear about the Alexa and all that. It's been in fact, I might have just turned her on because I said her name. Okay, Alexa, turn off. I'll try not to say her name again. But isn't that kind of cool that she listens to me? So, well, maybe unless she's spying on me. But anyway, awareness. Of course, I've seen ads about it. I know friends who have that device. I didn't say her name again. And I was just at my friend's house in Alabama over the holidays, and she had one. And we were needing a new speaker, so I thought, why not get a a good speaker that has the Alexa on it. She just came on again. And that way that's what I can get. So I was aware of it. So I was interested. So I got more information. I talked to my friend. Okay, Alexa, turn off. I talked to my friend Candace about hers, and she was showing me her older mother lives with her and has some health issues. So she has a device where she can ask the machine to show her mother's room. She's got some cameras, and so when she's at work, she can look to see that if her mom's watching TV or having breakfast, just that she hasn't fallen or something like that. So interest. I talked to some other people that had it. I talked to my sister Lisa. She has one and said she didn't use it very much. So, and then evaluate. So I can evaluate the idea and say, hey, is this something that we would use and would it be useful for us? And so I'm evaluating, seeing how much it costs, getting feedback from friends and family. And then I can try the product or the idea. So I was at other people's houses and I could try it and see how it worked. So, a different product, maybe it's testing, driving, road testing a car, or using someone else's technology device, or borrowing someone's shampoo if they have, their hair smells really good, and you say, hey, can I get a little bit of that, and try it on your own, something like that. So just trying things, and then adopting. And so this is the individual decides to purchase the product, which we did with the Echo that I have sitting next to me. And so that becomes, I adopted it. This can apply to ideas and thoughts. It can apply to the fact, I need to exercise every day or at least 3 times a week, and starting to implement those things into your life. So it's a really interesting process, and I think it's very important for all of us as PR people or people interested in just communicating to others about how people accept ideas. And some people may stop and they may not go all the way to the adoption. So they may decide, in fact, when I was going through this process, I said, well, I'm an Apple user, so what kind of speaker does Apple have? So I looked it up, and they have one, except it was like over $200, and the Echo that I have was like $90. And so it was just, for me, so I'm evaluating, but I looked into Apple and then I dropped off. I didn't accept that device for my home. Okay, so that's just kind of an example of how that works. Okay, so examples of communication for Hope House Detroit. You can see that we talked about who our target audiences are. And let me pause for a second. So I had the wrong content on the previous slide, so I have fixed that. But examples of communication from Hope House Detroit, we decided that we needed to improve their website. They didn't have a navigation bar. We needed to have a better one. We wanted to move the staff to About Us section and have a Get Involved section, things like that. And so these are the actual tactics. And then we said we want to put together a newsletter for donors, explain what HHD Hope House Detroit needs, what they're looking for, what kind of help they need, and maybe a newsletter for guardians of these kids and how they, just giving them practical life strategies and advice as a way to be a thoughtful, valuable resource for them. So those are just some very basic. We had a lot of things. These are just 2 that I selected to put on this slide. For ways that we could, put some tactics of communication in place for our client. Okay, and then the 4th step is measurement. And this is where you're measuring your results against your objectives. So you go back and you look at what were your goals, what were your objectives, and then you see, did we do this or not? So measurement, you're evaluating, it starts in the planning stage. And so you're evaluating all the things that you planned. How did you succeed on those things? So basically, you're looking at, was it adequately planned? Did the audience understand my message? Were the audiences reached? Did I meet my budget? Did I make what could I do differently in the future? And so there's 3 different levels, again, of a PR program. The basic, did you reach your target audience here on the bottom? what kind of impressions, how many times did they hear from you, where did you put your ad, or what kind of articles did you get published online. It could be intermediate and measure, did your audience retain your message? Are they aware of who you are? That type of thing. And then in advanced, are they actually changing their behavior? So again, that's in your book, and you can take a look at that in more detail. I realize I'm at 40 minutes, and I want to keep these on the shorter side. You also, there's measurement of message exposure, like what kind of message did you get out there. Way in the past, we would actually, cut clippings out. We had a service that we would pay, and they would read newspapers all over the country, and then every month you'd get a pack of your newspaper clippings to see how often your company was mentioned in different newspapers. That's not the most effective way. They're just saying you got your message, it was exposed. And so that's one step, but it's not all the steps. Again, today we could do that with internet hits with Google Alerts, where we don't even have to use another company to cut the newspaper for us. Measurement of audience awareness. This you could be doing through surveys. Day after recall. Many times there's a survey done, and see if I can remember it. When people are called, they're watching TV, they're called, and they answer the phone, and they're asked, what was the last advertisement that you saw? Who was it for? 80% of them cannot answer that question. So it's like the recall of whether they got that message or not. Was your message accurate? So did the media convey the key copy points? Did the audience get your key copy points? Did they understand your message? Was it clear to them? Did they accept your message? What do they think of your communication? You can do that through surveys, lots of other research methods. Did they change an attitude? You could do a benchmark study, which is a study where you measure the audience before your PR campaign, and you measure them again after the campaign to see how effective you were. And action. This is the ultimate objective. What kind of behaviors did you get from your audiences? Did you increase the number of donors? Did you increase the sales of a product? Did you defeat or pass a proposed bill? When I worked in the communications office at Macomb Community College, and our whole PR team, we were involved in getting the millage passed for the University Center, which is where all the many area colleges have offices, and they teach classes out of there. So we got the millage approved. So it was a big effort. It was approved. So we were effective because we got the millage approved by the voters. So here's an example of evaluation. We could evaluate how many kids are attending the reading program. Did we increase that number? We increased the number by 10%. We initiate contact with a local elementary school to begin a partnership. We had a summer block party, and we had 50 people attend. So that's just very quick examples of seeing if your campaign was successful or not, evaluating it all. So that wraps us up for today. Thanks for sticking with me for 43 minutes. And if you have any questions, again, always let me know. Thanks so much.